the first time since I've taken command here, I want to know nothing.
There are some TV shows that just stay with you. The theme song alone is enough to take you straight back. And if you're watching this, you probably know exactly which one we're talking about. Today, we're looking at the cast of Hogan's Heroes, the show that premiered in 1965 and became one of the most beloved comedies in American television history. Let's find out what happened to the men and women of Stalag 13. This is Hogan's Heroes, 1965, cast then and now, 2026. Can you recognize them now? A little background. Hogan's Heroes premiered on September the 17th, 1965 on CBS, and it ran for 6 full seasons, 168 episodes in total, before its final broadcast on April 4th, 1971. The show was created by Bernard Fain and Albert S. Ruddy, and it was set inside a fictional German prisoner of war camp called Stalag 13 during World War II. The premise was unlike anything audiences had seen before. A group of Allied POWs, led by the sharp and endlessly resourceful Colonel Robert Hogan, secretly running an espionage and sabotage operation right under the noses of their bumbling German captors. The concept itself was controversial from the beginning. World War II had ended only 20 years before the show first aired, well within the living memory of millions of Americans. And yet, somehow, the show worked. It was funny, it was clever, and beneath its comedic surface, it made a quiet but unmistakable point. The Nazis were fools, and the men who stood against them, even in a comedy, were heroes. The show became a top 10 hit in its very first season and received 12 Emmy Award nominations over its run. What many viewers may not have known at the time, and what makes this story even more remarkable, is that several of the actors playing German characters were themselves Jewish refugees who had fled Nazi persecution in Europe. Their lives had intersected with the real history the show was making light of, and they brought something genuine to those performances that no script could fully account for. It is one of the stranger and more poignant footnotes in all of television history. Now, more than 60 years after that first broadcast, we're going to look at the people behind the characters. We'll walk through the principal cast, where they came from, what they achieved, and what became of them in the years that followed Stalag 13. Bob Crane, Colonel Robert Hogan. Bob Crane was born on July 13, 1928, in Waterbury, Connecticut, and grew up in Stamford. From a young age, he was drawn to music. He was already playing the drums at 11 years old, inspired by his idol, the jazz drummer Gene Krupa, and he later performed with the Connecticut Symphony Orchestra's youth program as a teenager. After high school, Crane didn't go straight into entertainment. He spent time working as a watch mechanic and a sales clerk before eventually finding his way into radio broadcasting. He started at smaller stations in New York and Connecticut, and by the mid-1950s, he had landed at KNX, the CBS flagship radio station in Los Angeles. His morning show became the #1 rated program in the city, earning him the nickname the King of the Los Angeles airwaves. His guests included Frank Sinatra, Marilyn Monroe, and Bob Hope. His transition to television came gradually. He made guest appearances on shows like The Donna Reed Show and The Dick Van Dyke Show. The latter came about after writer Carl Reiner appeared on Crane's radio show and invited him to do a guest spot. By 1965, Crane's agent had sent him the script for a new CBS sitcom, and the role of Colonel Robert Hogan followed. As Hogan, Crane was charm itself, quick, confident, always 3 steps ahead. The show made him a genuine star. He received 2 Emmy nominations for the role, in 1966 and 1967. During the show's production, he also appeared alongside several of his co-stars in the 1968 film The Wicked Dreams of Paula Schultz. But the years after Hogan's Heroes were difficult. The show ended in 1971, and despite appearing in 2 Disney films, Superdad in 1973 and a small role in Gus in 1976, and briefly headlining his own NBC series, The Bob Crane Show, in 1975, which was canceled after just 13 episodes. Crane struggled to find roles that matched what he'd had. He turned increasingly to dinner theater, acquiring and touring a comedy play called Beginner's Luck, which he both starred in and directed. On June 29, 1978, Bob Crane was found dead in his apartment in Scottsdale, Arizona, where he had been performing Beginner's Luck at a local dinner theater. He was 49 years old. He had been bludgeoned to death, and an electrical cord had been tied around his neck. His co-star discovered him after he failed to show up for a lunch meeting. The murder has never been officially solved. A suspect, his friend John Henry Carpenter, was tried in the 1990s but was acquitted, and the case remains open to this day. His 2002 biopic, Autofocus, starring Greg Kinnear, brought renewed public attention to his story. Bob Crane was buried at Oakwood Memorial Park in Chatsworth, California, and later moved to Westwood Village Memorial Park, where he rests beside his second wife, Sigrid Valdis, who played Hilda on the show and passed away in 2007. Werner Klemperer, Colonel Wilhelm Klink. Werner Klemperer was born on March 22, 1920, in Cologne, Germany. His father was Otto Klemperer, one of the most celebrated orchestral conductors of the 20th century. His mother, Johanna Geisler, was a soprano. It was a household saturated with music, and Werner grew up playing violin, trumpet, and piano. When the Nazis came to power and the Kroll Opera House in Berlin, where his father worked, was shuttered in 1933, the Klemperer family read the situation clearly. Werner was 13 years old when they emigrated, eventually settling in Los Angeles, where Otto Klemperer would take up the directorship of the Los Angeles Philharmonic. Werner enrolled at the Pasadena Playhouse and began training as an actor. During World War II, Werner Klemperer served in the United States Army, joining a Special Services Entertainment Unit and spending much of the war touring the Pacific, performing for troops in productions of Macbeth and Arsenic and Old Lace. After the war, he made his Broadway debut in 1947 and began building a screen career that leaned heavily on his German accent and bearing. He played Nazi officers and foreign villains in a range of films and television episodes, including a notable appearance in Stanley Kramer's Judgment at Nuremberg in 1961. When the role of Colonel Klink came along, Klemperer agreed to take it on one non-negotiable condition: Klink could never succeed at anything. The commandant of Stalag 13 had to be a fool every single time. The producers agreed, and Klemperer threw himself into the role with complete dedication. He received 5 Emmy nominations for the performance and won twice: Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series in 1968 and again in 1969. What made Klemperer's portrayal remarkable was the layer beneath the buffoonery. He was a Jewish man, the son of a family that had fled Nazi Germany, playing a Nazi officer on American television, and doing it in such a way that the character became a figure of ridicule rather than menace. He understood exactly what he was doing. After Hogan's Heroes ended, Klemperer largely stepped back from acting and returned to his first love, music. He toured as a concert narrator with symphony orchestras across the United States, performing at venues including Carnegie Hall, and appeared at the Metropolitan Opera in New York in 18 performances of Mozart's Die Entführung aus dem Serail between 1979 and 1982. He also earned a Tony Award nomination for his role in the 1987 Broadway revival of Cabaret, where he played the Jewish shopkeeper Herr Schultz, a role that felt, in some ways, like a quiet answer to all those years of playing the other side. In 1993, he reprised Colonel Klink in an episode of The Simpsons, appearing as Homer's guardian angel. He declined other requests to revisit the character after that. Werner Klemperer died on December 6, 2000, at his home in Manhattan from cancer. He was 80 years old. His ashes were scattered at sea. John Banner, Sergeant Hans Schultz. John Banner was born Johann Banner on January 28, 1910, in Stanislaw, Austria-Hungary, a city that is now Ivano-Frankivsk in western Ukraine. He grew up in Vienna, studied briefly at the University of Vienna with the intention of becoming a lawyer, then changed course and committed to acting instead. In 1938, Banner was on tour with an acting troupe in Switzerland when Hitler annexed Austria in the Anschluss. He could not go home. His parents and all of his siblings, who remained in Austria, were later killed in concentration camps. Banner emigrated to the United States as a refugee, arriving with no English and learning it phonetically while taking his first professional work at the Music Box Theater in New York. By the time of his casting in Hogan's Heroes, he had spent decades as a character actor, typecast given his accent and his build as foreign authority figures, often German or Austrian villains. There was a particular irony in all of it that Banner himself acknowledged. He once said, when asked about playing Nazis, "Well, who better to play Nazis than we Jews?" Sergeant Hans Schultz was a different kind of role. The guard who sees nothing, knows nothing, and hears nothing. The man who quietly looks the other way was, in Banner's own reading of the character, not a Nazi at all. He told TV Guide in 1967 that he saw Schultz as a representative of simple human goodness, caught up in a situation he had no power to change. It was a thoughtful and even moving interpretation of what could have been a throwaway comedic part. Banner appeared in every single episode of Hogan's Heroes across all 6 seasons. He also played the character in a guest spot on The Lucy Show and appeared alongside Crane and Klemperer in the 1968 film The Wicked Dreams of Paula Schultz. He once joked that his wife Christine's exceptional cooking was responsible for his weight increasing by about 80 pounds, and that this fuller figure was precisely what helped him land the role of Schultz in the first place. After the show was canceled in 1971, Banner made guest appearances on television, including The Partridge Family and The Doris Day Show. He had retired to Vienna with his wife, and they had recently purchased a home in France when, on January 28, 1973, his 63rd birthday, Banner died of an abdominal hemorrhage at a hospital in Vienna. He was the first member of the principal cast to pass away, and he was buried at Mauer Cemetery in Vienna. Robert Clary, Corporal Louis LeBeau. Robert Clary was born Robert Max Weiderman on March 1, 1926 in Paris, France. He was the youngest of 14 children in an Orthodox Jewish family whose parents had emigrated from Poland. He began singing in cabarets as a child and was performing on French radio and studying art in Paris by the time he was 12. In September 1942, when Robert Clary was 16 years old, he and 12 other members of his family were rounded up and deported to Nazi concentration camps. He was tattooed with the number A5714. He passed through the camps at Ottmuth, Blackhammer, and Gross Rosen before arriving at Buchenwald, where he spent the remainder of his imprisonment, 31 months in total. He survived in part by singing for his captors every other Sunday, which earned him extra food. Every member of his immediate family who was deported was killed. Clary was the only one who made it out. He was liberated by American forces at Buchenwald in April 1945. After the war, he returned to singing in France, and his recordings were eventually brought to the United States. He arrived in America in October 1949, where he began building a career in nightclubs, on Broadway, and on television. He became close friends with comedian Eddie Cantor, and later married Cantor's daughter, Natalie, with whom he would share 32 years before her death in 1997. When Clary was cast as Corporal Louis LeBeau in Hogan's Heroes, he was clear-eyed about the distinction between the show and his own experience. He was always careful to point out that Stalag 13 was a prisoner of war camp, governed by the rules of the Geneva Convention, an entirely different world from the extermination camps he had survived. He said, simply, that he had no concerns about the show and that the comedy was aimed squarely at the Nazis' incompetence. After Hogan's Heroes ended, Clary appeared in the 1975 film The Hindenburg and maintained long careers on the soap operas Days of Our Lives, where he appeared from 1972 to 1987, and The Bold and the Beautiful from 1990 to 1992. In 1980, he began speaking publicly about his Holocaust experiences after years of silence, and he spent his later decades as a Holocaust educator. He volunteered with the Simon Wiesenthal Center and the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles. A documentary about his life, Robert Clary, A 5714, A Memoir of Liberation, was released in 1985. He also channeled his experiences into painting, which became an important and sustaining part of his later years. Robert Clary passed away peacefully at his home in Beverly Hills on November 16, 2022. He was 96 years old. He was the last surviving member of the show's original principal cast, a distinction that carried its own extraordinary weight for a man who had spent his entire adult life bearing witness to what he had endured as a teenager in those camps. Richard Dawson, Corporal Peter Newkirk. Richard Dawson was born Colin Lionel M. on November 20th, 1932 in Gosport, Hampshire, England. His father drove a moving van, and his mother worked in a munitions factory. And like so many British children of the era, young Colin and his brother were evacuated during World War II to escape the bombing of England's coastal cities. The disruption meant that, by his own account, he attended school regularly for only about 2 years. At 14, he ran away from home to join the Merchant Navy, where he served for 3 years and supplemented his earnings by boxing. After his discharge, he turned to stand-up comedy, eventually making his way to America, where he changed his name to Richard Dawson and began building a career in television. His role in the 1965 film King Rat, playing a British military prisoner, was reportedly what brought him to the attention of the Hogan's Heroes producers. As Corporal Newkirk, the British RAF conman, forger, pickpocket, and card sharp, Dawson brought a loose, improvisational energy to the ensemble. Newkirk was always working an angle, and Dawson made him enormously entertaining. His chemistry with the rest of the cast was a significant part of what made the show work season after season. After Hogan's Heroes, Dawson became a fixture on American game shows. He was a panelist on Match Game from 1973 to 1978, appearing in 1,279 episodes, and his popularity there led directly to his being offered the hosting role on Family Feud, which debuted on ABC in July 1976. The show was an immediate hit, and Dawson's warm, freewheeling style, including his trademark of kissing female contestants for luck, which earned him the nickname the Kissing Bandit, made him one of the most recognizable personalities on daytime television. He won a Daytime Emmy Award for Best Game Show Host in 1978. He hosted Family Feud until 1985 and made a brief return as host in 1994 and 1995. In 1987, he made a memorable film appearance opposite Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Running Man, playing a villainous, egotistical game show host named Damon Killian, a piece of casting that many viewers found both perfectly apt and richly funny. Richard Dawson died on June 2, 2012, from complications of esophageal cancer at the Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was 79 years old. He was interred at Westwood Memorial Park. Ivan Dixon, Sergeant James Kinchlow. Ivan Nathaniel Dixon III was born on April 6, 1931, in Harlem, New York City, where his family owned a grocery store. He grew up partly in the South, attended Lincoln Academy, a private boarding school for black students in Gaston County, North Carolina, and went on to earn a degree in drama from North Carolina Central University in 1954. He later studied at Case Western Reserve University and the American Theater Wing in New York. Dixon made his Broadway debut in 1957 in William Saroyan's The Cave Dwellers and appeared in Lorraine Hansberry's landmark A Raisin in the Sun in 1959. In 1958, He served as a stunt double for Sidney Poitier in The Defiant Ones. His most celebrated pre-Hogan's Heroes film work was the 1964 independent drama Nothing But a Man, which he would later describe as the most personally meaningful role of his career, a story about a young black man navigating the realities of the deeply prejudiced American South. In Hogan's Heroes, Dixon played Staff Sergeant James Kinchlow, the communications specialist, and Hogan's default second-in-command. His casting was notable. He was one of only a handful of black actors in the mid-1960s to have a regular role as a positively depicted character on a primetime network series, alongside Bill Cosby on I Spy and Greg Morris on Mission Impossible. Dixon left the show after the 5th season, the only member of the original cast to depart before the series ended, a decision he later said he regretted when he learned the show would be canceled after just one more season. Following his departure, he transitioned primarily into directing and spent 2 decades helming episodes of major television series, including The Waltons, The Rockford Files, The Bionic Woman, Magnum, P.I., and The A-Team. He also directed the theatrical films Trouble Man and The Spook Who Sat by the Door. Throughout his career, Dixon worked actively to improve representation for black actors in Hollywood, receiving 4 NAACP Image Awards, the National Black Theater Award, and the Paul Robeson Pioneer Award from the Black American Cinema Society. Later in life, he moved to Hawaii and ran radio station KONIFM on Maui before health problems brought him back to North Carolina in 2001. Ivan Dixon died on March 16, 2008, at Presbyterian Hospital in Charlotte, North Carolina, from complications of kidney failure. He was 76 years old. He was survived by his wife of 58 years, Burleigh Ray Dixon, who passed away in 2019. Larry Hovis, Sergeant Andrew Carter. Larry Vaughn. Hovis was born on February 20, 1936 in Wapato, Washington, and grew up in Houston, Texas, after his family relocated there when he was 3. From an early age, he identified as a singer before anything else. He sang with his sister at fairs and on local radio as a child, and in his teens joined a popular Houston quartet called the Mascots, who won a talent contest that took them to New York to appear on Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts. Hovis earned a degree in philosophy from the University of Houston, signed with Capitol Records, and released a solo album. He appeared on Broadway in 2 revue shows in 1959 and 1960, then moved to California in 1963 and began trying to break into television. His early TV work included recurring appearances on Gomer Pyle, USMC, and 2 episodes of The Andy Griffith Show. He also performed stand-up comedy at clubs around Los Angeles during this period, honing the comedic instincts that would serve him well once he landed on Hogan's Heroes. He came to Hogan's Heroes by a somewhat accidental path. He had appeared in the pilot episode in a minor role, and when 2 other actors declined to join the regular cast after the show was picked up, Hovis was offered the permanent role of Sergeant Andrew Carter, the wide-eyed, earnest demolitions expert. Carter was written as the most wholesome and naive member of the group, the one who could be trusted with explosives but not necessarily with a secret. And Hovis played that particular brand of cheerful, bumbling sincerity with genuine warmth. While filming the series, he was also writing for Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, for which he received an Emmy nomination in 1968 for Outstanding Writing Achievement. The dual career as performer and writer gave Hovis a creative range that many of his castmates admired. After Hogan's Heroes ended, Hovis remained busy, acting, writing, and producing game shows, including Liars Club and an early version of Lingo. He toured in the national road production of The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas in the early 1980s. In the 1990s, he brought his creative energy into education, teaching acting at Southwest Texas State University in San Marcos for the last decade of his life, a role that suited him, by all accounts, every bit as much as anything he had done on screen. He was one of the pallbearers at Bob Crane's funeral in 1978, alongside Robert Clary and producer Edward Feldman. Larry Hovis died on September 9, 2003, in Austin, Texas, from esophageal cancer. He was 67 years old. He was survived by his 4 children and 3 grandchildren. Kenneth Washington, Sergeant Richard Baker. Kenneth Washington was born on October 19, 1936, in Ethel, Mississippi, and grew up in San Francisco after his family relocated there. He eventually moved to Los Angeles to pursue acting, and throughout the late 1960s, built a steady career as a guest star on television, appearing in episodes of Star Trek, I Dream of Jeannie, My 3 Sons, Marcus Welby, MD, Adam 12, Petticoat Junction, and Dragnet 1967, among others. He was notably the first and only black actor to be featured in a major guest role on Petticoat Junction, a distinction that speaks to just how slowly the television industry was moving on matters of representation at the time. In 1970, when Ivan Dixon departed Hogan's Heroes at the end of its 5th season, Washington was brought in to fill the communications role as Sergeant Richard Baker. The character functioned similarly to Kinchlow, underground radio operator and de facto second-in-command, though Baker was written with a somewhat less prominent role in the scripts. Washington appeared throughout the 6th and final season of the show in 1970 and 1971. It was, by any measure, a short run, but it placed him permanently in the history of one of CBS's most enduring programs. After Hogan's Heroes was canceled, Washington continued working in television through the 1970s and 1980s, with guest appearances on shows including The Paul Lynde Show, The Rockford Files, Police Story, and A Different World in 1989, which was among his last appearances on screen. He also had a small role in the 1973 science fiction film Westworld. Unlike many of his fellow cast members, Washington largely kept out of the public eye in his later years, living quietly in Beverly Hills, long after his acting career had wound down. What Washington came to represent in his final years was something that would have been difficult to anticipate during the show's original run. He became the last living link to the world of Stalag 13. One by one, his castmates had passed. Banner in 1973, Crane in 1978, Hovis in 2003, Dixon in 2008, Dawson in 2012, Klemperer in 2000, and finally Clary in November 2022. Each death closed another chapter. Washington carried that history quietly and without fanfare. On July 18, 2025, Kenneth Washington died at his home in Beverly Hills, California, at the age of 88. He was survived by his wife, his siblings, and his 3 children. With his passing, the curtain came down for good on the cast of Stalag 13. It's remarkable, looking back, how much genuine history was carried by the people in that ensemble. Jewish refugees who had fled the very regime their show was making fun of. A black actor who was one of the few with a regular role on primetime television in the mid-60s. A man who had survived the Holocaust and spent his later life refusing to let the world forget it. A British kid who ran away to sea at 14 and ended up one of the most beloved game show hosts in American history. A radio personality from Connecticut who became a star and whose death remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of Hollywood. What is easy to forget, watching the show today with fresh eyes, is the sheer audacity of what it attempted. World War II was not ancient history when Hogan's Heroes went on the air. It was recent, raw, and very much present in the lives of the people watching. Families across America had fathers, brothers, and uncles who had fought in that war. Some had not come home, and here was a television show asking those same families to laugh at the men who had been their enemies, to see them as bumbling idiots who couldn't outsmart a group of prisoners who spent their days digging tunnels and pulling pranks. That it worked that it ran for 6 seasons and found its way into the hearts of a generation says something about the power of comedy to process even the most painful chapters of human experience. The cast that made it happen was, in its own way, one of the most unlikely gatherings of people ever assembled on a television soundstage. Their personal histories were extraordinary, their talent undeniable, and their chemistry unmistakable. Hogan's Heroes was, on the surface, a broad wartime comedy about bumbling Germans and clever prisoners. But the people who made it were anything but simple. They were survivors, innovators, artists, and, in ways both deliberate and personal, genuine heroes in their own right. We hope this look back brought up some good memories. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps us keep making content just like this. And if there's another classic show or cast you'd like us to revisit, drop a comment below. We read every one of them, and we'll see you in the next one.